The Echo Chamber, brought to you by the Holmes Report and produced by the international broadcast specialist Marketeers. Sponsored by the Bullet Group, putting you in tomorrow's conversations today.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Echo Chamber. This is Maja in London with Arun in Hong Kong, thanks to the miracle of technology. And this is our news roundup of what's been happening on Planet PR over the last few weeks, and it's been pretty busy. Arun, let's start with the Next 15 chisel, the merger of Byte and Kekst 100 as AIMA steps down. You wrote a really great analysis on this. What's your take on the situation there?
Thanks, Maja. Hi, everyone. Yeah, Byte and Kekst 100. I think there were three elements to this story, or maybe four. So the first is that it's another merger, and I think we are rapidly. I wouldn't say we have merger fatigue over at the Holmes Report.
Not quite,
because it's always good to write about mergers. It gets us, it gets people interested, but it's clearly a pattern, and a trend that we're seeing. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is that it's Byte and Kekst. I don't think there's any surprise about those two firms coming together, particularly after they merged their operations in Europe and Asia back in, I think it was 2014. It's the other two elements that were surprising here. The first being that AIMA Hines is stepping down. After... I always get the numbers wrong, and I haven't got them in front of me. But I think it's something like 28 years. Is that right?
Hang on a second. What did we say?
I think it's 28
years, including 18 as CEO. That's
right. So, and she really did embody. She does embody the Kekst 100 brand, and it's quite a singular brand in many ways. It's got a very unique culture, which is really, I think, kind of flows directly from AIMA. People really love working for her, and for her to step down, I thought was a surprise, given all of the work she's done in recent years to reposition Kekst, and indeed to kind of broaden Kekst's offering via the acquisitions of some other agencies in London, which kind of gives us a neat segue into the other element here that was surprising, which was that the merged entity will not carry Kekst's name, which I think people probably thought was the obvious choice.
Yeah.
And instead we'll have a whole new name. I don't think, I think Byte's name, Byte's really only in a couple of offices, so that would have been a real surprise. But I think most people would have thought Kekst's name, especially after they've kind of bulked up in the last couple of years. So that was a surprise.
I've never liked the name Kekst 100.
Ooh, you're taking shots already.
I think it's quite exciting. I guess it's a balance between taking what's best from the legacy brands and then creating something fresh and new. I mean, I don't know if whatever happens, it's likely to be greater than the sum of its parts, I would have thought. I'm not sure whether keeping Kekst 100.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Tim Dyson the Next 15 CEO has calculated that the costs of legacy outweigh the benefits of stability. So, i.e., if you really want to transform a couple of brands, agency brands that are, if we're being honest, best known for being B2B tech PR brands, and that kind of positioning doesn't necessarily represent the most progressive kind of ideal in the market. So if you really want to reposition that, then maybe you do need a whole new brand.
And what's next for AIMA, do you think? Does she have something else up her sleeve?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's a surprise in a way that she has left, given that the Kekst 100 brand is going to be no more. And I'd love to know what happened first. But I'm sure we will find out in the kind of weeks and months to come. AIMA is very highly rated in the market. She's always been someone that I think has toyed with the idea of perhaps seeing whether the grass is greener outside of the kind of carefully cultivated garden that she's created at Kekst 100. She has her role at Arthur Page,
Yes.
which certainly doesn't hurt her profile in the industry. And she is, of course, clearly she's got many, many more years left in this game. So I think there'll be several acts, and she won't be short of options.
Another carefully cultivated garden coming up, perhaps.
Maybe, yeah, or maybe she would prefer it to not be a garden.
Okay, this is getting a bit philosophical.
Yeah.
Maybe. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Maybe a canyon or
canyon.
An adventure park, perhaps. I don't know.
Okay, well, let's move on to the Nike thing, the Colin Kaepernick ad. One of the images of the year, already being used as a slide at a PR conference near you.
I'm already tired of seeing it in every dispatch from every PR conference, and I say that knowing full well that our own.
We are going to use that though, right?
In 2 weeks, I have a feeling we'll be seeing Colin's face up on the screen a lot.
Yeah,
but
Diana did a great analysis talking about the whole purpose v product thing, but also asking what Nike is going to do next. It's not just about dropping one ad and going, "Well, we're being very right on here, guys." How do you think Nike did with that, and what happens now?
I think you're right in that. I think Diana analyzed it really well, and in fact found an angle that I think most people had overlooked, which is that yes, Nike did a great thing. No question, they behaved authentically for how Nike has always behaved, I think, around these kinds of issues. But is it just going to be an ad? Or are they going to do more around the whole movement? Black Lives Matter, and that would kind of be my question. We discussed this on stage at the Asia Pacific Innovation Summit.
Oh yeah.
And the panelists, I put the same question you've put to me to our panelists, who were, let's say, probably more what you'd call kind of hardcore communications types, and they sort of said the same thing. It was a nice start, and definitely the kind of thing Nike would and should do, but is this where it stops? I mean, I don't know what you think about that.
I don't know. I guess it's the difference between. I mean, it's the difference between paid and earned again, isn't it? Really, you know, they've done the ad creative. It's clearly commensurate with their values as a brand, but it's about how they roll that out into proper, sustained and meaningful campaign that means that it carries on feeling like it's going to make a difference in some way to behavior or opinion or and not just their own reputation. So I don't know. I mean, it's too easy to tell. I mean, if everyone's still using the slide in a year and Nike have done nothing else, then I think that would be a bit weird, but we'll have to see.
It would be weird, but would not necessarily be surprising.
No, it would be.
Right?
It would be a wasted opportunity, let's say.
Yeah.
But they've got a smart team there, so you know, they know what they're doing. So we'll see.
But one of the other things that Diana touched on, which I thought was really clever, was also, you know, Nike's faced its own issues in recent times.
Yeah.
You know, about its own behavior in terms of sexual harassment. It's always had lingering issues around its supply chain, like many apparel companies do. And so, you know, Nike's under pressure, like every company, to walk the walk and not just talk the talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the key.
But I won't stop buying Nikes if that's what you're asking.
You're never going to stop buying trainers. How many pairs have you got now?
No, it's an addiction. I'm not going to disclose that kind of information on this podcast. I'm sorry.
It's Imelda Marcos levels of trainer.
Yeah, Imelda Marcos levels of corruption.
Okay, that's good to know. We'll talk about that offline, the corruption bit. Let's just briefly, beginning of September, it was a year since the demise of the mighty Bell Pottinger, which seems like It was a very weird time. It seems like yesterday, and it was like, oh God, was that a year ago? But it also seems like a million years ago. It almost seems like a different era in PR in which that happened.
Yeah.
Bit of a cautionary tale. I did my analysis.
Yeah, very good analysis, I thought.
Thank
Very
you.
sobering, I thought, your analysis.
Sobering or
it was almost
sober.
like the morning after, 1 year later. What
It
what
is.
happened?
It's like the hangover, the sobering up.
Yeah.
Post Bell Pottinger. I mean, it's in our premium section, so it's paid for folks, but it's worth every penny. Obviously, I spoke to James Henderson and Tim Bell, talked about the impact on the industry. Has it really made any difference? And I don't know, lots of initiatives, lots of ethics chat, lots of navel gazing about how ethical are we. But well, again, that's it. We're very much still, even a year on, in a bit of a wait and see situation there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it shone a spotlight on a really unsavory part of the industry.
Yeah.
And the question is, has that spotlight helped? Will it help? And I'm still not sure about that. To be honest, most of the people I speak to would, when I ask this question, have said that they don't think the whole scandal was good for the PR industry, because it just kind of reaffirmed in the sort of general public's eyes that PR is synonymous with bad actors like the Bell Pottinger people responsible for this behavior.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because you get the bad headlines, or like loads of headlines that put PR in a bad light. And then nobody sees, the general public, the readers of the FT probably aren't reading the small print of the Helsinki Declaration and how often this is now being discussed in the industry. So it's actually, even if things are changing on the ground in terms of tightening up processes and policies and procedures within agencies, that's never going to make a headline anywhere. So, the Bell Pottinger thing is always going to be linked, is always going to be a bad news story as far as the public are concerned. So there's that tension there between, it kind of doesn't matter what PR does to clear up its act. So yeah, tricky one.
Maybe it should rebrand.
Well, I want to talk to you about this because there's this comes up at this is forever coming up.
Oh, it comes up. I mean, it is the signal at which I stop paying attention. I'll be completely honest.
Hey, yes, but do pay attention.
Okay, I'll try.
I have the whole let's not call ourselves PR thing. I think we're going to have, and Ogilvy have ditched PR altogether in their name. I think we're going to have a bit of a backlash against that. I think we're going to see agencies reclaiming public relations.
Sorry, what did you say?
I think we're going to agencies reclaim the term public relations. If you really literally tuned out, that wouldn't surprise me. That wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. It's like, no, this is what we do, and we do it well, and it's all about earned, and it's all about storytelling, and it's all about relationships. So, I think the whole rebranding PR thing. John at Golin pointed out actually at the PRCA conference. He was wearing an "I Love PR" T-shirt.
Yeah, I heart PR, showing off his very impressive physique these days. John Hughes.
You may say that I couldn't possibly comment.
Yeah, no, he's been putting in a lot of work.
But he pointed out that if you search for the term PR agency, you get 2 million results in Google. Not Gurgle. It just rebranded Google. And if you search for integrated communications agency as a term, you get 79,000 results, which is, about nothing. So, and John Saunders at Fleischmann Hillard said last week at the Eco Conference, he's happy to be a PR guy. He thinks PR is where it should be. So I don't know. I think we need to kind of reclaim public relations as a term, and then I want to stop talking about it.
No, you make a really good point. In fact, I spoke to John about this earlier in the year, and he was talking about how Golin is sort of tinkering with its positioning around that. I think I talked about this with people like Richard Edelman and Rob Flaherty beforehand, who've never really discarded the PR terminology. Harold Burson as well. Of course, Paul Holmes, probably the biggest fan of the phrase PR in in the sort of known world. And, will every 2 or 3 years write a very well argued analysis as to why public relations is the best way to describe public relations.
Yeah.
My point is, I find the arguments, the back and forths, a little bit, I don't want to say pedantic, but just a bit of a distraction from what's actually happening on the ground. I do think some of it is also down to publicly held agencies trying to define themselves versus their own competition within their holding groups. So, they're really keen to now, I think, to call themselves PR because everyone's calling themselves integrated marketing. I think on the client side, it's always been a struggle. The phrase PR, it's seen as publicity and not as grown up. So that's kind of where it's come from. But, one thing I will say is there will be no shortage of people who will say that we have moved beyond PR.
Yeah, it's just going to go on forever, isn't it?
Yeah, and using PR as a verb, as a noun, it's just really never underestimate this industry's ability to shoot itself in the foot.
Yes, no, absolutely, and we love them all the more for it. Talking about definitions of PR, it looks like there was this big vote this week from the British Association of Professional Political Consultants that's voted to merge with the Public Relations and Communications Association, which we know and love as the PRCA, which, there's loads of trade associations, right? So for me, this was kind of inevitable and predictable, but there was quite a heated debate is probably an understatement. Why? What's the difference between public relations standards and public affairs standards? Why would they be separate? Shouldn't they be held to the same high standards?
You tell me. To be honest with you, I have not followed this story that much because I think it is quite a Westminster-focused affair.
It's very bubble. It's very Westminster bubble.
Yeah, APPC and PRCA. But you tell me, what was the objection to the merger?
Well, I think it boils down to public affairs kind of being a special case, and lobbyists being a different sort of practitioner and requiring a different kind of set of standards. So I think the resistance was partly to do with the kind of a perception that I'd be watering down that in some way if they were just part of a broader trade association, but then they're going to set up this thing called a new public affairs board with very stringent standards. So, it may well do the opposite and make sure everybody's kind of stepping up a bit further. It's all self-regulatory in the end, and the lobbying register is kind of
it's not real regulations.
It's not really regulation. So, I think that the fuss will die down and they'll just crack on because it doesn't make any sense to me that the two things are separate.
Yeah, I think you're right. The fuss will die down. I guess there's probably an element of lobbyists or public affairs professionals who would like to think that they are perhaps a more evolved form of animal than the mere public relations pro.
Yeah.
And, would like to keep themselves separate because of that. I don't think that's a particularly strong argument. I think I think the PRC has already does so much work in terms of lobbyists and PA professionals, and probably is a much more powerful organization. So it kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah.
That's a really glib analysis. I don't want to underplay the concerns that the APPC may have had, but it did kind of look to me like a bit of a landslide. I don't know. Was that not the case?
I think it was, 57%? It wasn't landslide.
Okay. Well, bigger than Brexit then.
Bigger than Brexit, which is obviously our benchmark for
for any kind of seismic political change. It's
bigger than Brexit. So it's official, isn't it? There's been loads of people moves in the industry. Fallout from the BCW merger continues, although it's finally got its new brand identity, which is very, very green.
Yeah, very green.
Alan van Molen quipped at the Eco conference that one of his predictions for next year is that BCW is going to have to start issuing sunglasses so its logo can be viewed safely because it's luminous.
Yeah, more shots. More shots.
He's always to be relied upon to yes, a shot. So Stephen Day's gone to FTI. There's some new public affairs and tech MDs in the States. David Gordon's leaving Canada to go to a cannabis company, apparently. So yeah, there's still a lot of moves out of and from that kind of big melting pot.
Yeah, and there were tons over the summer as well. I mean, there were so many senior client moves in the US in particular over the summer. And I'd love to say I could tell you why we're seeing all these moves. I mean, I think we know in terms of the agency mergers, there's always fallout from that. I think in terms of corporates, there's been a sort of a merry-go-round in the US because when one person moves, it just sort of kind of sometimes triggers this chain reaction.
Yeah, like domino.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, a lot of people moving. I doubt it will slow down. I think we'll continue to see a lot of movement, a lot of acquisition as well. I just think it's quite a fluid time for the industry in general.
And Mark Reed's been confirmed into Sir Martin Sorrell's old job at WPP. He's obviously speaking up PRovoke in Washington, DC, our big global summit in a couple of weeks.
Martin Sorrell is, not Mark Reed.
Yeah, Martin Sorrell. What's he going to be talking to Paul about on stage? Future acquisition plans. That's intriguing.
I mean, knowing Martin, he will talk about anything, right? He'll take any question, except of course one particular set of questions. But I suspect he'll talk about his new venture, what he's looking to accomplish, where public relations / earned media fits in within that. Maybe what he's learned. Probably there'll be a few subliminal shots at WPP. And it'll be box office. I suspect Martin always gives good copy.
He does always give good copy. Yeah, that is true. I wonder who. I just have a feeling he's going to start trying to pick more stuff off from WPP. I don't think that's finished. I don't think he's done with his Rwenge against WPP.
No. I think I think probably not. I think he doesn't have a non-compete, so it's nothing is stopping him.
We shall see. I wonder if he'll try and buy BCW. That would be fun.
That could be quite expensive.
He's got some cash there behind him.
He does, yeah. I mean, that would be a very big price tag. Maybe he will target certain people within BCW. That might be a more realistic goal for him. But it will be interesting to see what he does, if he does anything with PR, because he's got a mixed record with PR agencies in general. And I'm kind of interested to see what he says next week about whether he is going to invest in public relations.
Yeah, that will be fascinating. And he's part of a cracking lineup. We've got P&G Chief Brand Officer Mark Pritchard's opening the conference on the first day. Richard Edelman's chairing our independent agencies panel, and we've got some really cool non-PR guests. We've got this Senator Mark Warner, who's Vice Chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He's going to be talking about fake news, so that will be absolutely fascinating, I think.
Yeah,
and then we've got two guys from the Washington Post.
CEO and executive editor.
Marty Barron and Fred Ryan.
Marty Barron of Spotlight fame.
So it's going to be interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fascinating. We've got India's leading transgender activist as well on stage. We've got some big names, of course, in the marketing and corporate worlds. Yeah, it's probably our strongest lineup yet. I think year 7 is looking good, and the move to DC has I think really helped.
Yeah, I think so too.
So there'll be a lot of content coming out. Much of it written by you, Maja.
I think I'm going to be writing an awful lot of content. Yeah, it's going to be an intense few days, but I'm looking forward to it. It'll be great. Team Holmes all in one place for the first time.
I know. That'll be mind blowing.
It's going to blow everyone's mind. We're
really
all in the
will.
same place.
You know,
Which doesn't happen very
it's like
often.
a weed now, Team Holmes. It grows and grows.
I don't know about a weed. There's definitely a horticultural theme here, what with Amy's tended manicure garden.
Didn't you work on Horticultural Weekly at one point?
I did. I was the deputy editor of Horticulture Week.
Did you get any good scoops?
Yeah, but they're kind of, it's, well, you know, it's a different world. It's a different world. There was less pressure on scoops, really. There you go, from landscapers and growers, but there you go.
It does well, though.
I learned everything I know at Haymarket Publishing.
Didn't we all?
Didn't we all? I wanted to tell you about the Eco conference I went to last week.
Oh yeah, how was that? It looked pretty interesting.
It was good. My panel with global women in PR was obviously the best thing, but
obviously followed closely by your other panel.
By my other panel on smart data. I am now just a panel moderator for hire, I think. But Barry Rafferty was really inspiring. There was this really interesting unplanned juxtaposition between John Saunders at Flush and Hillard, followed immediately by Barbara Bates at Hotwire. So he was arguing for the networks, and she was just then, and here's the strength of the mid-size, and they were just next to each other, which is, everyone's like, was that deliberate? But I don't think it was. It was just serendipitous. And I met Jonna Burke, who's the new Barry Legator at AMEC, our new measurement queen. She's great. I think she's going to be doing stuff in the measurement world. She knows her stuff. It's great fun. Alan, again, Van der Molen, bullish as ever about the industry getting its swagger back.
Not sure I share in his bullish.
It's a good word.
I think Alan Van der Molen has got his swagger back.
He's got so much swagger.
I think we can agree on that.
Does anyone have more swagger? He also had a really interesting sweater with kind of diamond patterns on it.
Yeah, I saw that on the picture. I mean, I didn't want to bring it up, but I saw it.
It was kind of like the elephant in the room. No one mentioned it.
Oh wow! Well, it's a good thing you're not talking about it on a podcast listened to.
I know. That's just enough, right? Nobody. But there was some real insights into the Irish market, which, you know, Dublin is one of those names that pops up if Brexit ever does happen as kind of, you know, a plan B or an outpost. For a lot of agencies are mooting Dublin as a base. It's obviously quite a small market at the moment. Chatted to David Kine about the global social impact work they're doing.
They've done really well, Kine.
They have. I think there's more to come there, and I definitely one to watch.
Yeah.
And then Anne-Marie Curran at Drury Portanovelli, it's a really emotional little chat about how she led the company through the hideous Irish recession in 2010 in her first job as MD, and especially a child, and she kind of just really doubled down on leading that company out of recession, which was really, really inspiring, really human management. And it was we must look more at this about what it takes psychologically to be a leader now through tough times. I mean, a recession is in extremis, but, you know, things aren't easy for anybody. And there's going to be more turbulence ahead, obviously. So that'll be really interesting to look at in more detail, I think.
And what about the Irish dancing?
I observed rather than participated.
Okay, and who did you observe? Is there a ranking or some sort of what
goes on at the Eco conference in Dublin stays?
I'm not sure Dublin. It does, really. I don't know. I feel like this is a golden opportunity you're missing here.
No, I won't embarrass anybody. There was not a single tweet without a picture of a pint of Guinness in it, though. It was a very Dublin event. So it was good fun. Praxis looks good as well as our.
Praxis is amazing, really. It's 650 people in Hyderabad, which is not, you know, a big PR center. So everyone's come in from somewhere else pretty much, including people from around the world. I did one session with the global SVP of comms at Dell, Stella Lowe, who'd come in from Boston. There were people there from Seattle, from LA, from New York. I did another session with some agency heads. It's an amazing, you know, year 7 as well. I think it's kind of interesting. It launched the same year as PRovoke, and just remarkable, and real credit to the tireless efforts of the non-profit behind that event, Amit Prabhu and his team. And yeah, it was a really good, I thought it was a really good event, actually. I mean, I think it's very young as well, which I really think always helps.
What you mean in terms of attendance?
Yeah, exactly. So it gives it a very different atmosphere. And certainly on the sessions that I moderated, I was very keen that we, talked about things that were of interest to the younger people in the room. Whereas at many conferences, I think we do talk about the kind of issues at the top of the industry, and it does skew a little more, a little old.
Yeah, we're all guilty of that. A load of middle-aged people chatting about the problems of middle-aged people running agencies.
Oh, gosh, this sounds really depressing.
Which is interesting, but it's great that it sounded like a really good event. Practice sounded like a really good event. What else is there? I've got one last thing on the agenda today before we go about our relative days. There's loads of research studies out at the moment, like almost too much. Loads of agencies are doing like really solid, huge bits of thought leadership on brand perception, purpose, what makes consumers buy brands and not buy brands. We had Wee's brand and motion study. Edelman have just got another thing out. Fleishman and Hillard have too. Weber Shandwick have done another iteration of their CEO activism research. I don't know, how useful is all this thought leadership stuff? I mean, it's interesting, and it's always, it's a story for us, and it's always an interesting read. But how useful is it in new business terms, I wonder? Why do they do it?
Well, I think they do it for new business, for marketing, which always makes me question the rigor of the research. And as someone who's received, you can't even count the number of research studies from PR agencies that I've received over the years. I think the rigor, by and large, is a little questionable with a lot of these studies. Not the ones you've just mentioned, by the way. Those are all big ticket research studies. So I think, there's been an improvement in the quality of research. But I'm always a little dubious about research studies that conclude with the final finding or the banner finding that buying public relations is probably a good thing.
Yeah, that's your answer to this issue.
Yeah, that's the answer to finding X. I would love to see a study that concludes that actually, no, you don't need to hire PR agencies. That would be something.
That's not going to happen on our watch, is it?
Well, I mean, if we ever saw a study like that, that would be interesting. That's not to say there isn't a lot of interesting things that come out of this research, notably, the Edelman Trust Barometer. But, I think Paul ranks top 10 thought leadership every year for us at the end of the year. And that's always quite interesting to look at, because it does, he really focuses in on the sort of more rigorous studies, research efforts, and what they've told us and why they've helped us rethink perhaps conventional wisdom. And that's what I think the best research does.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the moment, I think we're seeing just a little bit too much in terms of research studies telling us once again that brands need to take a stand, etc.
Oh, it's definitely the thing of the moment, isn't it?
It is.
I'm getting a bit tired of purpose, frankly, but
the perp wagon.
The perp wagon. So that's going to rumble on and on, isn't it? But yes, it's been busy, and we'll report back after DC, because no doubt there'll be loads of great gossip coming out of Provoke.
But no Irish dancing. I can.
Is there not? I think that should just be a prerequisite.
I think. Yeah, no, it's not happening over my dead body.
Okay, and on that note and that pledge, thank you for joining me in the echo chamber today.
Cool, thanks very much. All right, so we're now joined by Paul Holmes on the echo chamber. Paul, how are you? It's been a while.
I'm good, thanks. As long as we can mix up the guests and keep finding more interesting people, I'm happy to sit on the sidelines until I'm needed.
Excellent. I think we have had a lot of guests, it's true, but I think we've probably missed your insight into some of the big issues that have come out recently in the industry. Um, One of those, of course, is the latest leadership change at Hill and Knowlton Strategies, uh, on which you've written a very interesting analysis that's out today on the Holmes report. Now, you're no stranger, I think, to leadership reshuffles at Hill and Knowlton.
Oh, good Lord. No, I have I've lost count. And to a certain extent, it's easy to get into this rather jaded. This one is the leadership change that will finally turn Hill and Knowlton around. Once you've written that story 8 times, it's easy to become jaded and cynical and skeptical.
Yeah. So, by that token, are you saying that this one is not the leadership change that is going to turn Hill and Knowlton around, or perhaps, as I expect, you've taken a more nuanced view, bearing in mind, I guess.
Yes, I hope it's a little more nuanced. I think look, several of those leadership changes, certainly at the regional level, have been written since Jack Martin took over as global CEO. And I think occasionally, one has looked at all of those changes and thought, geez, that's chaotic and a little random. I do think in talking to Jack and some of the people around him that it's been more strategic than that, he's been basically giving a lot of different people within that organization sink or swim opportunities. And 2 of the people who have obviously swum are Lars-Erik Gonten and Richard Miller in Europe. And you and I, from our positions in London, over part of all of that time, have had an opportunity to see just what a success they've made in Europe. And I think, so much of our business is US centric, with some justification, because it is basically where, a huge amount of PR revenue originates. That those who are looking at Hill and Knowlton's continued struggles in North America, I think maybe a little surprised to find that the firm is, one of 2 or 3 real powerhouses in Europe. I mean, it's certainly top 3 and arguably top 1 in the EMEA region now. And so, to a certain extent, taking the people who've made that happen and putting them into global roles makes a lot of sense. And I didn't really get into this in the analysis, but there are more Europeans succeeding in North America now than there were 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you'd have pointed at Paul Tafe from H+K and said, boy, bringing people from Europe to North America doesn't necessarily work the way you'd like it to. But you have John Saunders doing a decent job at Fleischmann Hillard. You've got Karen Van Bergen now running all of Omnicom's PR operations. There are a few more Europeans making it in North America at a global level.
Yeah. These 2 are not going to move, though, right? So I guess the big challenge for them remains the H+K US leadership position. And as we noted online, what is it? This is the 6th that they're going to be looking for in 6 years?
Yeah.
Those aren't the numbers, I think, that anyone really wants when it comes to leadership of what is still the most important region for a global PR network.
No, I mean, I do think that this decision, which will be made, based on my sources, at the latest, early in 2019, is one that they actually have to get right now. And yes, that person will be a key addition to the leadership team that they announced this week. And they'll need, I think, to be receptive to some of the ideas coming out of Europe. But at the same time, they're going to have a fairly keen sense of what does and doesn't work in the North American market.
Now, in your analysis, you talked a little bit about the most recent occupant of the North American leadership role, Alex Jutkowitz. He came to H+K via the sale of his firm, SJR, which is a content creation firm which had done extremely well, I think it's probably fair to say, was seen as quite a prize, I think, when WPP acquired it. But his tenure at H+K hasn't perhaps progressed as successfully as some people may have hoped. How much of that do you think is down to him, and how much is down to simply the circumstances he found himself in?
Yeah, I think obviously, as your question suggests, it's a mix of both. Some of it is that it's hugely difficult during an earnout to focus on anything other than maximizing your legacy firm's financial success. And that may not be entirely compatible with a leadership position in the larger agency. And apologies for the dog.
That's okay. He's obviously got a lot to say about this story.
Yes, he feels very passionately that earnouts create all kinds of perverse incentives, and so that's obviously been a part of it. But I do think Alex, I don't know him well, but based on everybody that I spoke to within H+K, Alex can be a little prickly. If he doesn't consider you he doesn't leave you in any doubt feels. And I think he felt that, SJR was this modern, innovative, forward-looking content creation shop, very digital, very social, very, very sort of 2019 and beyond. And Hill and Knowlton was a fairly stodgy, bureaucratic, slow-moving, very traditional and perhaps old-fashioned business. And I don't think he hid that particularly well.
Some truth in that observation, I suspect.
Yes, absolutely.
It sounds to me like it was probably a question of style, perhaps, rather than substance, when it came to the.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
Yeah. So Lars Erik and Richard Miller become global leaders. They're not really splitting the regions or anything like that. They do have specific areas of focus, though.
Yeah, I mean, sort of in total shorthand, Lars Erik is really more corporate and Richard is more consumer. Lars Erik is more operational and Richard is more creativity and client relations.
Right. Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to watch. I mean, as I think you noted, in your analysis, H+K's had quite a lot of change, a lot of restructuring, or how to put it, structuring and restructuring, in terms of how they have shaped their kind of global footprint. They've had sub-regions, they've had regions, they've had markets reporting into global. So this is the latest chapter. But I think probably this looks like the one that has the best chance for success that we've seen.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously there's an attempt here to get the best of sort of continuity and heritage with genuine innovation. And Lars Erik described it to me when I talked to him as radical evolution, which is, part of my headline for the piece. I think the question is, how radical will it be? And I think it needs to be pretty radical in the US.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, because I think sometimes I say we, people that are maybe in the media or observing, or just in general, the kind of business observers, and maybe even the business community as a whole, we overplay the value of radicalism. Is that a word?
That's the disruption.
Disruption. And we underestimate the importance of continuity and stability in being able to drive change. And I'm curious to know your thoughts on that, because it's very clear, I think, that H+K is, it's a big organization. It's a little bit like a tanker, let's say. And it's not going to miraculously morph into, a speedboat. It requires, a huge amount of change management, and maybe that does involve something that's more akin to evolution rather than revolution.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think what it needs is steadiness and firmness and determination, and I think it's easier to do when you have an understanding and appreciation of what's already there and what came before.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think you can do it in a circumstance where you don't have respect for and understanding of the crew that you're leading, right?
Yeah.
And you may need to put some new people in new positions, though I think actually, the sort of next level down, there are now plenty of decent people at Hill and Knowlton. They have a pretty good team in Marcoms, for example, which is not an area that was necessarily a strength 4 or 5 years ago. I just think the first thing you have to do to lead people is build mutual trust and mutual respect, right. And that may be easier for somebody who comes out of the culture to do.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. But I suppose the risk, of course, is that insiders sometimes are less willing to rock the boat. To take this analogy even further, and that, I suppose, is the risk of entrusting this kind of a change management job to people from within the culture. But their track record speaks for itself.
Yeah, and I was going to say I raised that issue when I was talking to the people involved, and both, that isn't the track record of Lars Erik and Richard in Europe. They have replaced, I don't remember the exact number, but it's 7 or 8 market leaders.
Yep.
It's a mix of people that they brought in from the outside and promotions for deserving internal candidates. But they have not been reluctant to rock the boat where the boat needed to be freed from the swamp, or whatever the analogy is, as you say, as we go deeper and deeper into this.
Wow, nice. Deeper and deeper. I see what you did there. Okay. Yeah. Right. So the other story I wanted to talk to you about, CNC Kekst. It's so funny, when you told me Kekst and CNC were going to merge, I kind of just assumed they already had merged. And then realized actually they hadn't. It's just we had written about it 5 years ago as something that was likely to happen. CNC had merged with Capital and then JKL, and I think we're working closely with Kekst. So this is not really a story that will surprise anyone. It's another merger, in a year full of mergers. This is really the year of the merger. But to me, it kind of almost provided a reminder, as the broader industry, as we've seen, is sort of increasingly infatuated with consumer marketing budgets and with, winning baubles at Cannes and these apparently gargantuan marketing budgets, which are going to lead the PR industry to the promised land. This kind of merger is almost a reminder of the enduring value of, corporate public relations and issues management at a time when those issues have, really never been more important.
Yeah, I think, I think it's fair to say that today, perhaps more than ever, the specialist boutiques are the ones who are benefiting from that focus, right? So the high stakes, all the big agencies claim to do, and to a certain extent do, high stakes corporate reputation, issues management, public affairs, change management, all of those things.
Financial.
But the market is defined, I think, by Brunswick, FTI, Finsbury, Kekst, Abernathy, Sard, Joel Frank, and their counterparts in global markets, Herring Schupener in Germany, Lorente Cuenca in the Spanish-speaking world, Ad Factors in India, SPRG in Hong Kong, but those firms that are resolutely focused on, or market leaders in their respective countries on corporate and financial.
Does that suggest to you there's been something of an overcorrection in terms of, let's say, the global networks towards consumer marketing? Because the growth numbers suggest that that focus is not necessarily paying off, or if it is, it's slower than many may have expected.
I think it's difficult to assess what's cause and what's effect. In other words, how much of this is that the big agents, the full service agencies are over-indexed towards consumer marketing, and how much of it is just that the boutiques are very, very good, and the big agencies, therefore, this is not an area where they can compete.
Yeah.
And I think there are a couple of interesting things there. So I think, first of all, there has to be a question of whether, the same people, is it credible to say, we're equally good at coming up with a big creative idea to help you sell more M&Ms, and we can also sit down with your CEO and help him through a major corporate transformation. And, I think to a certain extent, you have to figure out which one of those you're best at, and that's where you over-index. On the other hand, I've always thought that the talent question was huge here. So I think the corporate and financial business, particularly in the transactional arena, but also in crisis and also to a certain extent in change, is as much about individuals as institutions. In other words, you want somebody who's been through this 100 times before. You want George Sard or Joel Frank, or if it's Kekst, Jeremy Fielding. You want that, we want that individual. And those individuals are hugely expensive and difficult to maintain within a giant agency where, while they may in fact be the most valuable person on the team, they're also the financial practice leader.
Yeah.
And, therefore, there's a pressure to have them on a parity with the consumer practice leader or with the healthcare practice leader. And that's just not a reflection of how that business works. And companies like Brunswick and FTI have a lot more freedom in terms of compensation than a Burson Marsteller or a Hill and Alton would have.
Yeah, I do think the networks, even if it's not a focus in terms of resourcing, certainly in terms of attention, and perhaps fueled by the rise of digital and areas like influencer marketing and so on, I think that their attention has been captured far more by consumer marketing.
Sure, it is bright and shiny, and it's lots of revenue. Right. And the other thing is that it is more predictable revenue. It's steadier revenue, right? Yeah. The stuff that we're talking about in terms of change and transactions is typically 6 months of frantic activity and then maintenance work. Yeah. I'm probably oversimplifying a little. And, if you're a big publicly traded company, you want to go into next year with 90% of your revenue already booked, right? Yeah. So you have a base to build on. A lot of this business is not like that. I mean, I think all of the big players in this market have built now a fairly solid portfolio of ongoing reputation management, financial calendar work, all of that stuff. But it still can vary dramatically from month to month, depending on whether Monsanto is buying Bayer or there's a big coming together in the corporate world, or some CEO is replaced unexpectedly. Again, it's hard to do that in a publicly traded environment, I think, or harder to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of work that isn't always transaction based, as you mentioned. There's reputation management work, there's issues management work. Sometimes it isn't possible to plan for these things, but I do wonder if those skills have been marginalized a little bit in the networks, because I mean, even if you look at the networks, there's at least 2 or 3 of them that are very corporate focused. And there's no reason for them to not be strong here.
But then you'd also say that the 2 or 3 that are corporate focused have underperformed the 5 or 6 that are consumer focused, right? I mean, I don't downplay Weber Shandwick's corporate capabilities at all. I actually think they're very, very good at that.
Right.
Edelman in corporate and public affairs is a good agency, but there's no doubt that the real excitement at those agencies over the last 10 years have been in the consumer space, digital, social, content creation.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas those that are identified more with the corporate sector have seen relatively sluggish growth.
Yeah, fair point.
Maybe we need to watch Burson Cohen Wolf, because to a certain extent, that's the coming together of exactly those 2 extremes, right? Cohen Wolf was a consumer business that was, within the context of WPP, setting the world on fire. Burson was primarily corporate business that clearly was not.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we will, and we are watching Burson Cohen Wolf very closely. So, and this and many other questions, of course, will be considered at our 7th Global Public Relations Summit next week, PRovoke18, Paul, in Washington, D.C., which is shaping up to be our biggest summit yet. Got some really big names confirmed. What are you looking forward to?
It being over.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't say it. Yeah, the conclusion.
No, I think the top of the agenda is more exciting than it's ever been. And actually, to sort of fit it thematically into what we've just been talking about, I think we have a really strong blend of corporate and consumer speakers and topics. So, I think anybody who's interested in the future of marketing will want to hear Mark Pritchard and Martin Sorrell. I can't imagine two more knowledgeable, more provocative speakers on sort of how PR fits into the future of marketing than those two guys. And so I'm anticipating that both the Tuesday and Wednesday will kick off with some really stimulating stuff. If you are more of a corporate focused person, we've got Senator Mark Warner talking about fake news from his position on the Senate Intelligence Committee.
Interestingly, we couldn't run a Facebook ad on his session. It was rejected.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't realize. Nobody told me that.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you now. It only just happened. It was disapproved for being too political, which I thought was ironic that Facebook was shutting down an ad about a senator who's very, focused on the fight against fake news. So I thought that was a little ironic.
Yes,
Facebook.
we should certainly lead off the session with a question about that.
Yeah, but apparently it was more down to the fact that they perhaps view me or view our social media team in the UK as a foreign agent. And
possible.
Yeah, and so they're very careful about all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, but we've got the two senior people from the Washington Post, the publisher and CEO and the executive editor, and I think talking to them about some of the media challenges right now will be fascinating. And one of the sessions that I'm really looking forward to is Sri Gauri Sawant, who will be, I believe, our first transgender speaker. She is an Indian transgender rights activist who many people will be familiar with because she was featured in an ad for Vicks that has won awards around the world, including our award in India earlier this year.
Yep.
And I think that the thing that stands out to me actually is this event is bringing together people from PR and business and media and activism and politics, possibly to a greater extent than we've been able to do in the past. I think the move to Washington has been very helpful in that regard.
Yeah, it has. Although it's a shame that we've left the St. Regis Bell Harbour, which
it is. Though the Watergate is not without its own charm and its own historical resonance. So I'm looking forward to sort of seeing how the feel of the event changes.
Yeah, that's true. It will feel different, and maybe not in a bad way actually, because Miami, St. Regis Bell Harbour, a bit more of a kind of resort type of feel to it. Watergate, I feel like we're going to be plunged into the political maelstrom, and what is it? Just 2 weeks before the midterms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I hope we're better at predicting the outcome of the midterms than Provoke18 was, because that came 2 weeks before the seismic shock of Donald Trump victory, and I think we had one speaker there who predicted that.
Was that Frank Luntz or?
No, Chris Lewis had brought in
Pippa Malmgren.
Right. And Pippa was the one person who seemed convinced that Trump was going to pull it out. No pun intended.
The other thing I just point out about Provoke18, we've got a number of big names from the in-house world who maybe haven't had the kind of attention we've lavished on, some of these bigger names in some respects from the political and media worlds. But, we have marketing and comms leaders from AFLAC, Chief Brand and Comms Officer Catherine Hernandez-Blades. We've got David Kamenetsky, Chief Strategy Officer at AB InBev, Maggie Fitzpatrick from Exelon, Digital Head from Goldman Sachs, and also leaders from IHG, Levi, Mubadala, Nestle, P&G, as you said, Pfizer, PMI, Salesforce, and World Bank, and more. So it really is quite an impressive lineup, and we have more than 300. I think we're almost at 350 now in terms of attendees. So should be fun. I'll see you there.
Yeah. No, I'm very much looking forward to it. I mean, our team's worked very hard. Our sponsors and partners have worked very hard. I think it'll be a big event, and I think we have people from somewhere like 35 or 40 countries registered, which is always nice. I do occasionally go to global events where 90% of the attendees are from one market. So
only in America.
But I do think it's a genuinely global event, and it's bringing the industry together, and it's bringing the industry together with a lot of the people that we interact with on a daily basis. So
cool.
And I'm sure the content will be terrific.
I will see you there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's the other great thing about it, of course, is that it's one of the few times when the entire Holmes Report team is together in one place, so...
All 11 of us.
Oh, is it? Anyway.
Anyway, there's 11 now. So I'll see you there. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. See you soon.
You've been listening to The Echo Chamber. Brought to you by The Holmes Report and produced by Marketeers. Sponsored by the Bullet Group, putting you in tomorrow's conversations today.